Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a special Climate Week NYC edition of NYC Company Talks. As you know, NYC Company Talks is the name of our educational platform, and we strive to bring you important and relevant speakers to help your business. As the official sustainable travel and tourism partner of Climate Week NYC, last year we held a talks that was an official Climate Week session, and it was a part of the inaugural full-day event called The Nest that we helped to launch along with the Javits Center. The Nest has returned this year in a virtual format brought to you from the brand new Javits Broadcast Center and organized by industry veterans Britton Jones and Sharon Enright of NXT Events. They've put together a really compelling program, and this virtual format allows the Nest to reach people from all over the globe, and we are so happy to be a part of it. So today, I'm excited to bring you a thoughtful conversation on sustainability in New York City between our very own Fred Dixon and the head of New York City's Sustainability Office, Mark Chambers. But before we get started, we are very grateful to have Adam Lake, who is the head of Climate Week NYC, with us right now to set the stage for us. Thanks for joining us, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. So we know you are so incredibly busy this week running the biggest Climate Week in the world, and we're very appreciative that you made time for us today. Thank you so much. So, first of all, can you tell us why the Climate Group, which is based in London, and thank you again, because it's 9 o'clock your time, I think, 9 p.m. Tell us why the Climate Group first chose New York City as the host city for Climate Week, and why you continue to come back year after year.
So this is the 12th Climate Week NYC that we have run. And the initial decision came from the fact that the UN General Assembly brings together so many significant political figures, but also so many significant business figures as well. So we felt, we're a climate organization, let's do it at the same time so people aren't having to take additional flights and additional journeys to be part of Climate Week. But I think since I came in 3 years ago now, it's so much more than that. There is a real reason why Climate Week NYC is the biggest Climate Week on Earth. And I think it's because of the sort of energy, the innovation, the resilience of New York City. It creates all the ingredients that you need to create a really, really amazing event. I mean, 2 years ago, when we first started working together with NYC Company, we were getting, in addition to our main program of events, about 150 separate events organized by people in and around New York City. Last year, that grew to 350. And this year, thanks in part to the great networks that NYC Company and others have shared with us, that's actually grown in a lockdown year to over 500 events. We got that figure in today. So there is so much action, activity, energy in New York City from a business level, but also from a grassroots level. And I think that's, yes, the UNGA is the reason why we started in New York City, but it is those networks and those relationships. That's why we're still here, and that's why we will always be in New York City for this event.
Well, thank you, and we're so grateful to have you in New York City. It really, big events like this really shine a light on New York City. It raises the attention to the fact that we are a global stage and the best place for events. And the nature of your event, of course, highlights the sustainability of New York City, which we'll talk about in just a second. So thank you again. And on behalf of NYC and Company, we're very appreciative that we're the sustainable tourism partner. Can you talk a little bit about how that has helped with Climate Week NYC over the past few years?
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier on, Kelly, that our HQ is in London, and that's indeed the case. But we do have a smaller but still significant office in New York City, and it's growing. My team in New York is growing, and I'm really grateful for that. I think but we are small, we are an NGO, and the relationships that NYC and Company have helped provide for us, the contacts with some amazing organizations. We had a partnership with the American Museum of Natural History this year, which was fantastic, and many, many others. Those relationships have allowed us to grow something really solid and substantial, so that we can have these events, we can have this engagement, the wonderful out-of-home advertising that you provide for us ensures that that is targeted very much at people who maybe have not got involved in a climate event before, and they want to see something new, learn something new. So that's really, really helped. I think it's really interesting. In March this year, when we really had to make the call that we can't do this as a physical event, we really wasn't sure if this could work. So many significant climate events and non-climate events have been cancelled or postponed or scaled back. And many people came to me and said, Adam, why don't we use this as an opportunity to turn this into a global climate week, as it's going to be digital? And indeed, we do have so much more participation from people around the world. But something that was, really core to me is NYC is the heart and soul of Climate Week. And so it's really important for me that we maintained that. And I think it's the relationships that NYC and Company have built, together, but also with many people that you work with, mean that even though we are a virtual event this year, we have more events taking place. We've had this great relationship with the Javits Center, introduced by Fred and NXT for the Nest, and we actually filmed our opening ceremony, which Mark participated in at the Javits Center. I think it was the first large event to take place in this hybrid studio. And so I think it is those deep relationships that have actually sustained us and allowed us to make a climate week that it's not just carrying it on and making it on contingency, it's actually, let's make this bigger. And it really is bigger. And sort of final point on that, which might be interesting to some of the people watching, is, we've actually spent more money on Climate Week NYC as an event this year than we have done in previous years. Work with agencies, creative, studio space, and things like that. And we're an NGO, we need to pay the bills like everybody else. This is actually the biggest commercial success we've had in our 12-year history as well. So, I take great heart from that, but actually by working with people like the Javits Center and NXT, we can create something that sponsors will be attracted to, that really does work, and that's fantastic.
Well, that's great. I think you kind of answered my next question, which was going to be, we were so happy at NYC Company to work with you and the Javits Center last year on the Nest, which was hatched, so to speak, by Alan Steele, who's the head of our sustainability committee and the CEO of Javits Center. And I know that worked out well using the broadcast center. So where do you see, the Nest going from here, maybe next year, side by side with the Hub as Climate Week 2021, as you plan?
2021, we just finished our last event just now, and so the 2021 planning begins here. I absolutely loved attending the Nest last year. It was fantastic. It was really, really great. And I love that it's not a competing focus. It looks at things on a very different level. It has a much stronger NYC focus, a much stronger US focus, which is fantastic. And that's why I was a big fan of making sure that the Nest was an official partner of Climate Week NYC this year. And that will continue in 2021. I think, one lesson that we're learning, we will never do Climate Week the same way again. I think we've learned that because of the level of engagement, the level of diversity, the international approach that we've got out of going virtual means there will always be a strong virtual element to Climate Week, but we have to have that physical element there because that is where a lot of the work happens. So I would really like to see and explore the opportunity of maybe the two events being more physically closer together, certainly virtually, which we're doing this year. But I think there's a lot of common audiences and they can learn a lot from that. So I think there's a real future there for the Nest Summit. And I think it's fantastic that, it really was NYC and Company and Alan Steele at the Javits who sort of founded this idea. I can't lay claim to putting any work into it. I just sort of enjoyed the show, but it's worked absolutely fantastically.
That's great. Well, you know, Alan is so passionate about sustainability, and there's so much, so many great things he has going on over there with the green roof and everything. So, so we're thrilled to partner again next year. And again, thank you so much and congratulations on this year. And now I'd like to turn the program over to the NYC Company President and CEO, Fred Dixon. Thank you again, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And Adam, thank you so much for being with us. We can't thank you enough for this incredible partnership. It's really a point of pride for all of us at NYC Company, and we really enjoy working with you and your team. Congrats on a great week, and thanks for being part of this program today. We look forward to next year's program. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important talk. We're really honored to have with us a real leader in sustainability. Mark Chambers, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, is Director of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability. He's been shepherding the policy, legislation, and behavioral changes that have made New York City the U.S. capital of urban sustainability. Mark is a nationally respected expert in clean energy, inclusive climate action, and sustainability. He leads the city's sustainability programs, working to reduce the city's contributions to the causes of climate change and expand environmental equality across the city. This includes significant initiatives to meet the city's aggressive greenhouse gas emissions targets and achieve important air quality and renewable energy goals. Aspects of Mayor de Blasio's One NYC plan, which aims to create a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable city. Now, prior to this position, Mark recently served as the Director of Sustainability and Energy for the government of the District of Columbia, where he led an interdisciplinary team at the Washington, D.C. Department of General Services to creatively implement energy management and resource conservation efforts across 30 million square feet of real estate spanning all the district's property assets. He knows a thing or two about this topic at hand. An urbanist and licensed architect, Mark has dedicated his career to working on high performance design, zero waste policy, and city scale building energy efficiency with a focus on equitable economic growth, public engagement, and promoting transparency through data innovation. And we're really honored to have him with us. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Hopefully you can see me. Good to be here.
We can see you and hear you. It's so good to see you, my friend. It's hard to believe it's been a year since we were together.
I know. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Well, let's jump right in. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and we so appreciate your support of our programs. I think this is such a great window for our members and partners, and we have clients on the call today, meeting event organizers from around the world, as well as our members and businesses here in New York. So it's a terrific window through which to talk about this issue. Now, we know the city is very focused, of course, on health and safety of its citizens right now, as we continue to flatten the curve, wear masks, and protect ourselves and our loved ones from COVID-19. But we also know that creating a sustainable city really has never been more important. And I know that that's been put a little bit to the sideline at the moment, it seems, in the popular dialogue, but we cannot lose focus of that. We're all watching the unfortunate situation on the West Coast with the wildfires. And of course, this hurricane season seems unrelenting. So why should we be talking about sustainability more today than ever before?
Well, I think it's a great question. We have to. We're being forced to. I think that the consequences are being put in front of us in a way that they never have been before. And to be honest, we as a society, you know, in addition to a nation, have had a little bit of a history of not paying enough attention to this. And I think that those times are over. We are in an era of consequences. We're seeing a lot here in New York City. Last week, you were able to see the sky color change because of the forest fires on the West Coast. You know, we're all interconnected in this planet and our destiny as a species. And right now, we have to step up our game. I think that if anything, it's been a clarion call, both dealing with the COVID-19 response and you know, of course, you know, we are, you know, above 200,000 deaths in our country now, which is an unimaginable number. And you know, we really have to start to begin this work of a 10-year mobilization around confronting climate change. This is something that there's no more time to waste. There's no room on the sidelines to wait it out. And we will be, you know, what we're able to accomplish, you know, I think is going to have to fit into that time window so that we can make sure that we are rising to the occasion. And I also add that I think that this next decade that we're a part of is not just going to be defined by technology and policy, and it's going to, in a lot of ways, be defined by empathy. Our ability to truly value the lives of each other, and to do so in a way that bends our skill sets and all of our careers and passions towards combating a changing climate. Like, that's the work that we all have to take on right now.
I like the sound of that, and no doubt we need that more than ever. When you look at the headlines, and it is undeniable, as you said, just talking about the sky changing here in New York, that climate change, it feels like the clock is speeding up. And as you said, and of course now we're dealing with this pandemic. Are these two things intertwined?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they're intertwined in so much as they're both force multipliers. So in and of themselves, they're awful individually. I think if you take looking at the impacts of climate change that we're adapting to now, hotter summers, stronger storms, droughts, storm surges, it is, and the flooding that comes along with that in and of itself is terrible. Look at the toll that we're facing in terms of the COVID-19 crisis, unimaginable. Together, they create a particular powder keg that makes it really challenging for vulnerable populations all throughout the United States and the globe to be able to respond. I mean, excuse me, if we think about the summer being, of course, every summer is the hottest summer now. We were faced with a hot summer, extreme heat in urban areas, and on top of that, people can't congregate. So if you're elderly, if you are in any way disabled, you can't go to a cooling center, a rec center, a museum, place where you can kind of get cool. That is the combination of dealing with a pandemic and dealing with extreme heat, which is the impact of climate change. They're intertwined and they make each other worse, and it makes it very difficult for us to respond. But it showcases what we were in store for if we don't respond more aggressively. Yeah,
and it sounds like, I mean, there's no question, right, that climate change has contributed to the pandemic. Is that true?
Well, I'm sure there's an epidemiologist or a climatologist that could possibly address the pathology a little bit better than I can. But I will say is I'm less concerned about whether or not there's an inextricable link between the two of those, or causality, as I am about the window that we've had into honestly our inability to respond effectively to the disruptive nature of the pandemic. That is a clear window into what is in store for us in dealing with a changing climate. And if we're not able to kind of galvanize the resources, that's why when I say there's a 10-year mobilization that begins right now, it begins right now. It starts 40 days from now when Americans go to vote or early voting, and it continues throughout the rest of this decade to really bend ourselves towards a vision and a Green New Deal for all of us that is much more in line with the crisis that we're facing.
Yeah, and if that doesn't reinforce the fact that we all have a role to play, right, and we all have responsibility in this, I don't know what does. We're just talking about last year in the program where you joined us. As I said, for that event, we did have a number of meeting planners there and clients that are, of course, on this call with us right now, and we so appreciate their support and continuing to bring events to New York. Part of what made last year's event so wonderful was learning about the ways that the meeting industry was pivoting to be more sustainable. And this is an increasing conversation amongst event organizers. For example, last year, the buffet breakfast and lunch at the Nest was assembled from unused food from events that were held at the Javits earlier in the week. Just one small example. And when we talk about hosting events in New York, that's one thing to point to, of course. But we frequently talk about how we are a sustainable choice as a destination, because you think about nonstop flights, right? We hear all the time that connecting flights create more pollution than nonstop flights, for example. We talk about how our subways and bike share access make us less reliant on fossil fuels here in New York compared to other destinations. So when we're comparing New York to other cities or destinations worldwide, how are we really stacking up right now in terms of sustainability?
Well, New York is always going to do well in that category, right? Because we are the largest city in the country, 8.5 million people, a dense urban environment, because we have a really substantial transportation network, subway system, our per capita greenhouse gas emissions for every New Yorker is far less than it is in larger sprawling cities where people are driving everywhere and not able to benefit from that close proximity. But I think that important, or in kind of embedded in your question, is it has a lot to do with behavior and a lot to do with the choices that we make and the choices that we compel others to make. You know, you mentioned all the work that Alan and folks at Javits Center have done, which is incredible. I mean, you go to Javits Center, there's a 7-acre green roof up there. They've put in glass that is bird safe to kind of stop birds from running into the glass. They have staffing, of course, sustainability coordinators and managers there, efficient HVAC systems. Like, so they've really made this part of their delivery model for an effective space. That, of course, makes them more attractive to other people to want to have events there. But you have to keep in mind, all the people that are attending these events, they also should be demanding that of the spaces that they go to. So it's shouldn't just be a nice to have, it should be a bare minimum where we say that these are the exact types of things that if we are coordinating and corralling a network of folks of thousands and thousands of people, that's a voice. Like, that is an incredible, congregation of people that can really say, hey, we need more from the events and the spaces and the operations. And that's going to be contingent on our business. So it's a lot of it has to do with us pushing each other to be better. And I think that's part of what we're going to see more of. And I'd like to see more of with organizations taking that head on.
You have a receptive audience here. I think, it's really great to hammer that home because it is important, right? I mean, and you see this every day in people's product choices, I mean, like I was with a cousin of mine back pre-COVID and we went shopping and she would not buy anything that was wrapped in plastic. I was so impressed with her.
Which is difficult.
Which is very difficult, and I saw her take the strawberries that she really, really wanted over to the store manager and said, I would buy these if you package them differently. How much does that have an impact?
So it's important because we're building habits, right? We are changing our behavior and we're learning how to be better stewards of our environment. I will kind of make a caveat though. There's a larger notion that if you guys don't pick the correct strawberries, that it's your fault. All of climate change is just about like your inability to get those strawberries that aren't wrapped in plastic. And it's not true entirely. It should be more about the fact that why are you getting strawberries that are wrapped in plastic at all? Like, there's an upstream decision making for a lot of the choices that we are given that really comes back to businesses, manufacturers, federal and local statutes that say, hey, these are the governing objectives that need to be put in place so that individual behavior is choosing from all good options as opposed to you having to find the one that's not killing our planet and going to be something that, like plastics, which are here for thousands of years after we're gone. So I think we do want to change our behavior, but we also don't want to let everyone off the hook because there is some upstream decision making that we really need to put a lot of pressure on so that we're getting better choices, and that comes with collective power and everyone kind of aggregating their voices.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, she was a real inspiration to me, and I'll tell you what, I do not want to invite her to my house because she goes through the garbage. She's one of those people, right? And,
Excellent.
I'm trying to be better about it. In fact, Adam taught me about fabric softener sheets, which I did not know about. But this is what this dialogue is good for. We really have to educate people, and everyone does have a role to play. I mean, she went to that manager, and then he hopefully has heard from other people and will go to his suppliers. And to your point about the chain, it will go back up. And consumers, we as decision makers have to demand those changes. I think that's awesome. So speaking about inducing change, right? Your office is still pursuing the goals of One NYC, right? The mayor's plan to deliver a future where we all can thrive. Do you care to give us an update on, start with the overarching goals of One NYC, but kind of where we are in the report, and then if you would connect for folks how they relate to the UN's SDGs and what that means, because we're hearing more and more about how organizations in government and out of government should be paying attention to the principles of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But talk about One NYC first and connect those dots if you would.
Sure, no problem. So One NYC is the vision that this administration, once Mayor de Blasio came into the office, set out for a just, equitable, and sustainable city. So it was really the framework that was established to make sure that while we are pivoting and moving our city towards our carbon reduction goals and our goals around livability, we are also simultaneously confronting social inequality and making sure that we are doing the hard work to to really address some of the issues that have been very pernicious and systemic racism, looking at how we those components really make it impossible for us to get the gains we need in the other elements as far as our climate change goals. So that framework was something that was put in place, and every year we issue a progress report on it. Every year we continue to pass laws and move forward policy that is in line with those overarching goals. We actually last year put out a One NYC 2050 version, which is basically taking a lot of those policies, showing where we are so far, but then also projecting forward and saying, by 2050, here is a vision of what the city needs to look like when these policies start to come into fruition. And here is how New Yorkers and those looking at us can really wrap their brains around what we're expecting for a city. What are we expecting in terms of a car optional city, where we're no longer being tied directly to internal combustion engines of cars. And as a result, that does give us different indications about how do we use the spaces in between buildings, and what are we doing a little bit more to allow for New Yorkers to thrive. That also means making sure that they have access to kind of free and public education early. So the universal pre-K program is something that came directly out of the One NYC vision. It also kind of deals a lot with access to free healthcare, and tackles everything from all of those and to looking future forward at food production and how we need to kind of be a little bit more thoughtful about our climate goals and how they relate to meat consumption and all the different parts that really get into how we live as New Yorkers and what choices we can make now to embody a future where we can all be a part of it. The UN SDGs are really in alignment with that. One, they overlap, and we were intentional about making sure that that's the case. But the UN SDGs are really great because they provide a framework language, one that is really allows for whether you're a municipality, whether you are an organization, business, subnational, national, whatever it is, it gives you the framework to be able to understand here are the pillars that we need to be pursuing, both from a technical standpoint as well as an ideology standpoint. And here is how we start to put these policies and processes in place to get there. And I think that was something that really does a great job of creating this fixed point where everyone can, no matter if you have slightly different variations for your locality, you can still build them up into the same language of the SDGs. And that's really a powerful tool and something that we continue to kind of use as a way to benchmark our progress against other cities and other folks that are working on the same challenges that we are.
It's such a great approach. And we're seeing more and more sectors of the travel and tourism industry use the goals to inform their work, to help frame the values and missions of organizations. And we're going to be doing that at NYC Company too. So it's really, really important. One specific question, talk to me about carbon neutrality. And you talked a little bit about this, about sort of decarbonizing our grid, especially as it relates to fossil fuels, right? But 80% carbon neutrality by 2050 is what the plan requires. Is that, in your mind, is that achievable given the current landscape? What does that mean in terms of how the city is going to look? And I know part of that is helping some of our landmark buildings become more carbon neutral. And so there's a lot to that.
Absolutely. And so, we set out with a kind of a technical process early on of saying, we know that we can technically get to 80% by 2050, and we're going to start to move in that direction. As we've gotten further along, as of last year, we realized that we need to, 80% is still not going to be enough, and we're going to need to be able to really project the way to get to carbon neutrality by 2050. And that's a lot of what's in the One NYC 2050 report. It also was a lot of the goals that underpinned the policy work that we initiated and rolled out last year. As part of our Green New Deal for New York City, which kind of went along with what we call a Climate Mobilization Act, which is a grouping of bills here in the city that we passed last spring. One of the landmark pieces of that was the first of its kind global carbon cap on large buildings. So it said that large buildings in New York City over 25,000 square feet Starting in 2024, there's going to be a limit. And if you are above that limit, as far as the greenhouse gases that are needed to heat and cool and power that building, then you'll face a fine. And in 2029, those limits get a little bit lower. And so other people are going to have to do work to meet those limits. But bottom line is that large buildings, which make up the lion's share of emissions for a city like New York, they now have a line in the sand that they're going to have to begin doing retrofit work to make those buildings more efficient, which simultaneously makes them better buildings for the interior, for tenants, more comfortable, easier to operate, less cost to operate. So that investment is what's necessary to really address our building stock, and that will have a dramatic impact in New York City, both in terms of the performance of these buildings, but also in terms of the job creation and skill development that will be necessary both inside New York City and outside. So we're very excited that that is something that is now law. We also have set up several tools to be able to assist building owners in doing that, from financing to free technical assistance, everything to ensure and give as much assistance as possible so that building owners don't have to pay fines, because we obviously not want to see any fines. We want to see the carbon reductions.
That's right. Yeah. And buildings are a big part of the equation here for us in New York, right? I mean,
it's about 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions from the city are related to buildings.
So once we get that in line, we should be in really good shape.
We'll be in good shape, and we're also kind of working aggressively with the state to be able to meet their objectives, which is a 100% clean electricity grid by 2040. And so that will dramatically impact our ability to achieve our goals. Of course, state working well with city is fantastic. Nothing is a substitute for federal action. We still need federal action to be able to do what's necessary to truly lift and kind of move the mountains we need. But right now, we are moving aggressively forward and putting the policies in place that will really showcase what that looks like over the next 10 years.
Well, good. And I hope we get more and more federal support of that as we go forward.
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. So some programs the city has instituted as a response to the pandemic are also turning out to be good for the environment and good for our businesses. And one of them is the Open Streets program. I know we've gotten so much interest from around the world in what the New York City streetscape is like today. And if you're not here in New York, it's been kind of awesome in large part to have all of this shining on our street. But what does that mean for the sustainability movement?
Right. So the Open Streets has been amazing. I agree. We opened up 65 miles of streets in New York City to allow for people to kind of move at a socially appropriate distance. And that kind of led into a lot of the programming around increased city bike, shared bike movement. Of course, we're seeing not just in our city, but in other cities, hundreds of percentage points of ridership of bikes over norms, restaurants opening up on sidewalks. I think that we're also kind of recognizing the fact that these changes don't all have to be temporary. We are really looking hard at what are the benefits that we're seeing out of a kind of renegotiated contract with our public space to a certain extent, and whether or not we can actually think a little bit more clear-eyed about what does that need to look like in the future. I mean, now granted, there's a lot of competition for space on streets, right, sidewalks, and everyone wants some piece of it. I would really like to be able to see us keep a lot of those open streets open for pedestrians. I think changing this 120-year experiment with the internal combustion engine back into streets that are fit for people, not just cars, I think would be fantastic. Of course, not everyone agrees with me, but I do think that we have an opportunity now to really look at how do we redefine local, how do we redefine making sure everyone has the access to all the things in a good proximity, and whether it's their schools, their jobs, giving people the flexibility to do those in buildings that are now more interdisciplined. So it's not just one building for one thing. And I think I'm in my bedroom right now. So I think we're all very cognizant of the fact that we're looking at space usage differently, and we can probably do a little bit better job of having multiple uses for a lot of the buildings that we inhabit in ways that actually give more opportunity, not less. So I think that right now is a great time to again, renegotiate this social contract we have with public space, and to be very clear and very ambitious about how we reclaim a lot of that for pedestrians.
Yeah, I think I like the way you frame that. And, the thinking that just because nobody likes traffic, right? So, but just because you add more streets or you make more space available for cars doesn't mean there's going to be less traffic. That over time just means more people are going to be in cars and you're going to end up with more traffic anyway. So this moment has given us a window into what does it look like to have less cars in the city and how can we reimagine that space. And it's been, to your point, kind of incredible. And it's so interesting because you think about the 5 boroughs and the growth of the city long term, and the internal combustion engine aside, us all driving around in individual cars or being driven in a car, an Uber, a Lyft to the airport is not really a long-term solution. So when you think about private cars and you think about the future, what does sustainable transportation look like 20, 30 years from now in New York?
I mean, I truly think that we need to free ourselves up from the burden of ownership, right? So what we're seeing and the benefit of some of these rideshare programs and apps and different things is that there is a generation of Americans and not just Americans, but global citizens that are not bound by having to own a vehicle, right? They own a phone that gives them access to a vehicle. I think that freeing us up from that burden gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to think about, well, there doesn't need to be more cars if we're sharing them. We can find better and more efficient ways to use the cars when we need them. Those cars could be electrified. And the same thing goes with a successful bike infrastructure, both for regular bikes as well as electric bikes, and the safe separation of those two things. So I really do believe that what we want to see is, like, what we've done is we've taken one paradigm and added another as opposed to replacing it with another. And what we should be thinking about is a future where everything is electrified, everything is shared, and as a result, we have the ability to occupy less of a physical footprint and still get more benefit and value, because when your car you're not being used, it's being used by someone else and then being used by someone else. And it's based on what you need to do at that point in time, not just what vehicle you've signed on to pay for the next 5 years. So I think we have an opportunity to be a little bit more future forward with what we think transportation should look like. And I think a lot of that has to do with replacing the old model as opposed to adding on just this new one.
And you're seeing a lot of adoption amongst young people, right? I mean, they're leading the way in this regards. I've talked to so many young people that don't have cars. You don't need a car, don't even think about having a car. That's awesome. One of the things that the Open Streets brought for me anyways, I'm a cyclist. I love to bike around the city, and one of the upsides for me has been, much less traffic, right? And especially early on when we were, encouraged to get out a little bit, I biked all over the city in ways I never had before, because I used to stay sort of in the parks, right? I would sort of stay along the west side. I'm never one to bike in traffic, and that never really appealed to me. But you could bike around a lot more during the pandemic, which is so interesting. And city bike ridership seems to be up now. Do you think is this going to be permanent? Is this going to stick with us?
So yes, I do think that we are going to continually see more bike ridership, but we can't ignore the reasons why there haven't been, right? So up until this point, people feel safer now, and safety is the key obstacle to there being increased ridership. So a lot of the work that the city's been doing to add, I think it's 50 miles, if not 100 miles of bike lanes each year, that work has to continue. It has to be separated and safe so that cyclists can feel safe when they're driving and be physically separated from cars. I think that we have to acknowledge that we're creatures of habit, right? And the habit of cars is something that is very difficult to break. But we're also creatures of convenience. So the reason there's been such a large uptick in the use of rideshare programs is because it's more convenient. And when it becomes less convenient, when you have congestion, as we've seen in many cities of just explosion of for-hire vehicles, the ridership goes down because it's no longer allowing people to get where they need to go faster than an alternative. So I think that, again, as a cyclist, and I know when I'm biking around that oftentimes it is much faster to be on your bike than other options. As long as that continues and we create as many protected bike miles as we can, I do think that this time period is giving a really key indicator to a lot of people that we're kind of on the in-between side of whether or not they should cycle or bike, that this is an opportunity for them, and they should be able to do that in a way that make sure that you can kind of keep your bike safe. And that's where it's great about having the shared bikes, so you don't have to worry about ownership. But it's also something in which, we're doing a lot of exploration around the inclusion of cargo bikes and changing the rules around pedal assist bikes and e-bikes, all of those things to give people more options for 2 wheels or 3 wheels, to make sure that they can get where they need to go quickly, safely, but then also in a way that has a far less carbon footprint.
Yeah, that's awesome. Or single wheels. Have you seen these guys going around on these?
I have.
One wheelers.
I
would you
saw
do
one
it
this morning. So I will say this: I think that if I were to be on those unicycle wheels, it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be an incident. And so I'm like, I think that I'm perfectly comfortable with 2 wheels. I do not need to slip a disc or figure out some way to hurt myself.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm not young anymore. And I was never a good skateboarder to begin with. And it looks to me a lot like skateboarding. So
yes,
it's kind of interesting. Pivoting just a little bit, your office has been involved in the city's response to extreme climate change. And you talked a little bit earlier about rising temperatures, right? And that's been a real issue for people, particularly for people who don't have access. So talk to us a little bit about the program that you have to provide electric bill relief and free air conditioners here in New York.
Absolutely. So as I was mentioning before, a really horrible kind of conflux of issues this summer, where we knew there were going to be vulnerable populations that on a given summer are already hot in their apartments, don't have access to air conditioning. When you have neighborhoods that don't have significant street trees and just have urban heat island impacts, it's 5-10 degrees hotter inside, if not 20 degrees hotter inside than it is on the street outside. And so that's already an issue, not just in New York City, but urban heat, is much more deadly than a lot of the climate, catastrophes that we're seeing and we expect. I mean, it kills over 100 people in New York City every year. So extreme heat is a killer, and it's something that impacts urban areas all across the world. We knew this was going to be a problem. We knew that those vulnerable populations couldn't go out to cooling centers. And so we took a 2-pronged approach to this. First of all, we set up this Get Cool NYC program in partnership with other agencies in the city, as well as the Department of Emergency Management. And we distributed 74,000 air conditioners, free air conditioners, to New Yorkers, to vulnerable seniors particularly, and installed them to make sure that they would have access to cooling. And that's been running all throughout the summer to make sure, as we constantly update and make sure people have what they need. Simultaneously, we put a petition into the Public Service Commission, which governs the grid that impacts utilities and so forth for electricity. And what we did is that we made a successful petition for them to provide bill relief, which is 3 months or so of reduced bills for about 450,000 low-income New Yorkers, so that we knew that they would be running air conditioners, either the ones we're handing out or other ones that are already existing. And we know that it's going to be incredibly hot, and we want to keep people alive. And part of that has to do with making sure they can afford to do so. We have a lot of New Yorkers, again, close to 500,000, that are energy cost burdened, which means they pay more for their energy bills than it really is the norm. So that is something that we take very seriously, and we're able to be successful in kind of providing this continuity of services. It's not enough. I think there's definitely more that we need to do, but we're happy that we were able to add that response. And for my team at the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, to have them pivot to be doing this immediate response, and we were all on the phones answering 311 calls from seniors to help them with their installs. Like, it was really an important way for us to be part of the crisis response, and I think something that will be incredibly informative for our policy development going forward, to make sure that we're giving the right level of detail and agency to the populations that we're serving, and making sure we are listening and being really thoughtful about how we develop interventions and policies to help them. So I think it's work still to be done. Pandemic's not over, but we're happy that we're able to step up.
That's so awesome that you're doing that. I think that's just remarkable. And we don't think about that all the time, but heat in the city is an issue because you refer to the heat islands. And how are we doing on trees? I know we've been planting a lot of trees in New York for a long time, and the city is much greener than some people give it credit for. But how are we doing there?
We're doing okay. I mean, yes, we've been planting trees. Many people may be familiar with the Million Trees effort over the last decade. And we're constantly kind of developing proposals for additional trees. There's still hot spots in the city, still places where we benefit dramatically from street trees. And we have a lot of tactical methods and plans that are in operation to be able to add street trees where we possibly can. That also includes a cooling program around rooftops to be able to, in essence, paint roofs white, makes them reflect heat instead of absorbing it. All of that contributes to cooling neighborhoods. But honestly, planting trees is something that is really critical, will always be critical, and a lot more of it in neighborhoods, on streets, which are really suffering because of that heat, will always be a task that we are kind of pushing forward and hopefully being able to do more expeditiously.
I love that. And I know for a lot of groups that travel, that they're looking for ways to give back locally. And there are ways that you can buy and contribute trees, right, to communities that you visit. So that might be one takeaway for folks here. Last topic, and then we'll let you get back to your day. So, and this is a really important one, right? This sort of brings it all home to what's happening in the world today. And as we think about rebuilding the city and rebuilding the infrastructure for the tourism industry following this crisis, we know that it's not just enough to get back to where we were. And we recognize now with the dialogues that are happening across our country today and the strife that's there, that it's incumbent upon us to build back better than we were. Right, and this is an opportunity in many ways, and inclusivity and justice are a big part of that. So, if you would, can you frame for us? And this is hopefully a big takeaway for everybody today. In what ways social justice and the social justice conversation and climate change and climate justice could be intertwined? Are there any connections between those two? Those are two really big topics, I understand, but is there a connection between them two? And I know it's been something that our staff has been tossing around.
There is 100% a connection between the two. They are inextricably linked. I think to your first point around the idea that it's not about just rebuilding where we were. This is not about protecting our way of life. It's about changing the way we live. And that means that we have to be really thoughtful about the false choices that we often, fall victim to. We often say things like, oh, we want to confront systemic racism, but actually we should now focus on confronting education. That's the way in which we get at that. And then we're saying, we want to confront education, but the only way to do that is to invest in jobs. And then we would say, oh, we want to invest in jobs, but no, the real way to do that is to drive technology, and that's what's going to get the job. And we keep going through these places where we pivot and pivot and pivot, and we don't recognize that all of these things are interconnected, and we don't recognize that combating social inequality, looking toward combating social injustice, those things are not a benefit of the work we're doing on climate and the work we're doing around a higher performing economy. We get to a higher performing economy. We get to a place of being able to confront the climate crisis by doing the work now to fight social inequality. That's the way in which we get there. We think that these things are not always, go hand in hand. But the truth is, if we're ever going to marshal the amount of resources, people, skill sets to be able to truly bend our society towards meeting the carbon reduction bare minimum that we have to do to survive as a species, then we are going to need a bigger boat. We need more people in the tent. And that means that we have to be making sure that we're investing in the policies and investing in the people that will help get us there. We can't leave frontline communities behind when we are moving forward to be able to tackle these, because we won't be able to do it. We actually need more people. We need everyone on this. Again, there's no room on the sidelines. And I think that for us to make sure that we are being as aggressive as the moment calls for, it means taking a hard look at some of the social structures that are holding us back and confronting them head on. That's how we move forward.
And that's so insightful. And I really appreciate you addressing that, because, you know, we have to take our rose-colored glasses off, and we have to see what's going on out there. And you certainly felt it, certainly for folks who had no choice but were essential workers, and they were exposed more to this pandemic. I mean, it can go on and on and on. And I know we probably could make this its whole session to talk about, but I really appreciate that. So last thing, takeaways for us on that topic, but also on the topic of being more sustainable, just, and inclusive. What steps can our members and folks on the call today, what takeaways would you give them that they can use to ensure that everyone is doing their part to create a more truly sustainable, just, and inclusive recovery?
Okay, so I'll say a couple things. I think I'll actually try to keep this as very, very simple as possible. I think as one of the biggest things that I often advise people on, especially when they're looking at ways to combat kind of racial inequality, is hire amazing Black and brown people to be a part of your workforce. Everyone's out there. Amazing people to be that want to do the work, and make sure that you are doing an intentional effort to bring populations into your work, because I think that it is something that it's looked at as an impossible thing to do by some organizations, and it's not. We're out there. Come find us. Hire people to do work. Very simple, but it's something that requires an actual intent to do that. Second thing I'll say is around transparency. We recognize that not everyone is going to be able to either be able to pivot in the same way, whether you're confronting kind of social injustice or confronting some of the climate, like decarbonization goals that you want to for your business, your organization. So be transparent about that. I mean, let other people see that you're working towards that. Let other people see what steps you're taking, where you are having success, where you're having failure, because that community will be built out based on the fact that people understand that they can begin anywhere. They can start this now, and they're not alone in not necessarily being certain where to do it, but they do know that there are people that are focused on ensuring this is a reality. And that community, I think, will be built out where people being more vulnerable and transparent with their data and what's happening. And the last thing I'll say is around activism. I think that one thing that I've kind of hinted towards in a couple of points in time in this call is the fact that there is no room on the sidelines. You can't just hope that this is all going to work itself out. You actually have to be an activist. You have to say that I am going to confront these issues internal to my organization, or I'm going to confront those in a way in which I am telling the grocer that we need strawberries not wrapped in plastic. Like, that's activism. And then what happens is that then you say, well, maybe I should get a few folks together to go to several different grocery stores, and maybe we should start to build out a network. We'll have a Zoom call, an anti-plastic strawberry Zoom call. And like, let's build out communities that are actually confronting some of these things in whatever way we feel is going to be the best way for you to contribute. But you have to contribute. No one gets a pass, no room on the sidelines. We need activism, and we need people to hold themselves accountable and start holding other people accountable, myself included. Hold everyone accountable. Also, 40 days to vote, please do so.
I love that. And if you haven't taken the census, do that as well, right?
Absolutely. My2020census.com.
That's
go
it.
do that. .gov,
Mark,
sorry.
.gov. But I tell you what, and you know, the other important thing you can do is talk, right? And I think you've given us that gift today. Talk about these issues. They're not all easy to address, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And I think the more the solutions are within our grasp. So Mark, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And I learn something every time. And it's just a joy. So thank you for taking time out of your day.
No, right back at you. Again, always good times. Hopefully get to see you soon, like in person.
Yes.
In a whatever distance is appropriate at the time. But it's but good to see you, and thanks for having me.
No, I really appreciate it, Mark. Thank you. See you soon.
All right, take care.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Mark. He's just incredible, and really appreciate him being with us. We're going to pivot to our last speaker, and we're really thrilled to have our global partner, Mastercard, with us today. Mastercard has been an incredible supporter of our All NYC campaign and crusaders in sustainability as well. And I have to tell you, at the beginning of this pandemic, Raja Rajmanar, their head of marketing, who's on our board, reached out to us and said, what more can we do? And Mastercard has been there for us every step of the way. They've been the most incredible partner. And I just want to say that and thank them for being there for us, for New York City, for NYC Company, and for tourism's recovery with their partnership on this campaign. But we're now going to hear from Miguel Gamiño. Now, Miguel is the Executive Vice President, Enterprise Partnerships, and Head of Global Cities for Mastercard. Within his role, Miguel leads Mastercard's global activities with cities and the City Possible platform, forming public-private partnerships that drive civic efficiency, inclusivity, equality, and ultimately better quality of life. Now, previously, Miguel served as the Chief Technology Officer for the City of New York, so many of us worked with him here in New York City, and he was the Chief Information Officer for both the cities of San Francisco and El Paso, Texas. So today he will address how Mastercard is working to build a more sustainable future for New York City by pursuing commercially sustainable social impact that drives inclusive growth and environmental stewardship. Miguel, it's my pleasure to welcome you, and I'm going to turn the program over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Fred. I really appreciate that. It's great to be here with you all around such a critically important conversation. Not to mention, it's great to be surrounded, at least virtually, by so many smart minds, and many of whom are incredible friends also, like the one and only Mark Chambers that I haven't seen in a while. So if nothing else, participating today, I got to catch up with him and hear from him, which has been absolutely incredible. I want to try to spend a few minutes to create a connection, if you will, to, hang on a second, let me make sure apologies here. Well, the screen share isn't working. Hopefully you can still hear me, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. We can hear you. We actually
okay.
could see that just then, Mark. Miguel, it did come up.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for it's a little strange on my side for whatever reason, but
I can never do this. You're doing much better than me.
I do it all day, every day, and never fails. There's something I haven't seen before. So hopefully you can see the screen now. Yes?
No, actually, we can't see it right now.
Okay. I'm going to go without it, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Whatever you're more comfortable with. We appreciate it.
Yeah. So listen, what I want to talk about anyhow is kind of this intersection of inclusivity and sustainability, right? And in fact, the conversation that you just had with Mark alluded to, in fact, kind of pointed at specifically a few of those instances. But I want to point out some things that we're doing and how we see those things connecting. And while I have the pleasure of looking after our commitments to cities worldwide, it's people across the whole organization that come together to really drive these commitments to the environment, and led by, of course, our incredible Chief Sustainability Officer, Christina Klobernatz, and Raja, and all the people across the organization that are jointly and significantly committed to this effort. And because economic growth cannot come at the expense of the planet, right? We believe that it really is time for something of a different approach. And so we continue to pursue commercially sustainable social impact that can deliver short-term goals and gains while also building long-term systems that set up everyone for success. So what all of that means is we've embedded sustainability in everything we do at Mastercard, and who we are as a company, how we drive our business forward, how we support the communities and the environment around us. And appropriately, it's embedded into our long-term commitment to financial inclusion, right? And driving inclusive growth. And those two things are so jointly related that pushing one, we believe, pushes the other, and vice versa. So we really do believe that the only sustainable growth is inclusive growth. And so The only way we think we can achieve that is by building a more connected world where everyone has access to kind of the prospects and the path to a better life. So you've heard some news recently, probably, that we have recently doubled down on our original commitment to bring 500 people into the digital economy. So to take what we've learned so far with the first 500 million we accomplished, and to press forward to reach 1 billion by 2025. And this is about financial inclusion, but it's also about activating more people in the dialogue and in the community around this topic of sustainability. Also, as Mark mentioned, every single person has something to do and to contribute. Digital payments sounds technical and wonky, but it allows people to be paid safely and securely and potentially environmentally more friendly, while creating a bridge towards financial security, that particularly for the people who need it most. So we leverage our technology and our data and our expertise to help governments, cities, and central governments and everything in between around the world design and implement programs that really do enable this inclusive growth to empower people from social welfare and essential disbursements to things like digital identity and service delivery. And there's a whole list of things that we've done right here in New York City, a place that we call home. Things like equipping city leaders and City Hall with actionable insights to understand what the impact is of, let's say, a pandemic or other policy or climate change to the local economy and vice versa. Understanding how to enable cities to activate these tools to help hundreds of thousands of residents be more prosperous and maybe overcome a pandemic or other similar kind of social impact issue. We've also activated our partner network and committed $1 million to expand critical workforce programs that help people, essential workers, find a safe way to commute to work. And there was a brief discussion about City Bike, and I agree with Mark that the comment about safety is a huge factor, and your anecdote about your own ridership being kind of expanded because you feel safer. I would argue that for a lot of people, it's also just accessibility, right? Do they have access to that as even an option? Can they pay for it, not only financially, but technically? Do they have a means by which to take advantage of those options? We're helping enable that. Expanding beyond that, mobility solutions that really take into account public health concerns so that people can still take a more sustainable method of transport without feeling like they're compromising their own health. And so things like contactless, and we've been working further with MTA and Omni to enable that to grow quicker so that people who need it most, who need access to public transit the most, can do so in a healthy and safe way. Also expanding access to opportunity to close this achievement gap. So we've worked right here in New York City with the Bronx Academy of Science and Engineering and the Partnership for New York City to establish a New York City high school dedicated to building cybersecurity skills. And this is all about, bringing forward the next generation so that they can be prosperous and also thinking about all the sorts of things that we're talking about today. And lastly, but not least, empowering the small business leaders of New York City. In particular, leveraging our Digital Doors program to help Black-owned and operated businesses free of charge for a year get their businesses online, and work together to help nearly 1,500 or more those Black-owned businesses enter and strengthen their digital presence so they can continue to deliver service in an online world that is developing by the minute. Mastercard's also making critical strides for inclusion in across New York City and other cities around the world. But we're doing this to increase our commitment to environmental stewardship at the same time. So today, nearly 85% of our global workspace meets regional or international green certification standards. And all of our owned campuses and owned data centers are LEED certified, including our New York City Tech Hub right down in Manhattan. Our commitment to sustainable leasing has nationally recognized in 2020 when the U.S. Department of Energy and Institute for Market Transformation named Mastercard a 2020 gold level green lease leader through the Better Buildings Initiative. And this year in particular, we're proud that we were the first in the payments industry to receive approval from the Science Based Targets Initiative for our updated emissions targets, which align to a 1.5 degrees Celsius climate trajectory. We also joined RE100 in a commitment to continue sourcing 100% renewable energy and committed to undertaking the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures for enhancing our climate disclosures. We believe genuinely that these real impacts come when you apply the full scale and scope of our network to advance the environmental initiatives. And that's why we've put the power of our network behind the Prices Planet Coalition that you may have read about. Through these initiatives and in partnership with our merchants, banks, cities, businesses, and consumers, we've pledged to restore 100 million trees over 5 years. Supported by this Prices Planet Coalition, the availability of sustainable payment card materials and other partnerships like with Swedish fintech Daconomy that allows consumers to gain insight into their own carbon footprint is a way that Mastercard sees clear opportunity to create scale and sustainable consumer solutions that educate consumers on mindful spending while providing them with ways to take meaningful action to fight climate change. So, Fred, again, thank you. We're a global company and we're trying to do all of these things at global scale, but we do call New York home. And so it's particularly special to share this story, our Prices Planet story with you here today during New York City Climate Week and celebrate kind of the accomplishments, but more importantly, the trajectory and the work that we're going to do together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I love that. And we appreciate Mastercard's partnership more and more every day. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. I'm going to now turn the program back over to Kelly to wrap it up. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, Fred. And thank you, Miguel. It's great to hear about another way that Mastercard is supporting New York City through the Smart City Initiative. So thank you. Last week, we were so happy to have Ginger Singer with us on a Talks, and she talked a little bit about the Digital Doors program. And we are really appreciative of your partnership, especially your support for All In NYC. And just a very quick commercial for all of our members that are tuned in right now. If you've not signed up for All In NYC Neighborhood Getaways, please do so. We have about 200 offers and signature experiences up there right now on our website. We're promoting it through press, out of home, taxi TV, paid social, local TV, etc. And to incentivize the locals in the drive market who we're targeting with this program, to incentivize them to patronize the businesses in the program, Mastercard is offering a generous statement credit to registered cardholders when they shop, they dine, stay, and explore. And that's an invitation to all your meeting planners out there too. So we hope you can take advantage of All In NYC Neighborhood Getaways, and we encourage our members to sign up. And we also ask everyone to post their photos or their video about how they're all in for NYC on any of their social media accounts. In closing, I just want to again thank all of our guests today. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Adam Lake, for joining us. You can see on the screen here, these are the websites for the Nest, and then the Climate Group on their Facebook page. You can watch all of the sessions that were part of Climate Week NYC. There's great content here. It's all free, so I hope you can all tune in and listen to some more of these great talks. That is it. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be in touch with details on our next talks. Thank you very much.